for the next part, we will be having vectors.
Here in vectors, we have the physical quantities. It is any number that is used to describe a physical phenomenon quantitatively. So kanina I've introduced to you the different physical quantities such as the meter, seconds, kilograms, in mass, length, time, volume, and such. So, yun yung tinatawag natin na physical quantities. So, what is magnitude? Magnitude is specified completely by a number and a unit. So, magnitude, yun yung value or yung number na or yung value ng isang measurement for a specified unit. Next natin is, we have to compare which is the scalar quantity and the vector quantity. I know most of you are already familiar with this one. So, sa scalar quantity, these are the quantities which are only expressed only expressed by its number. So, sa scalar quantity yun. So, anong example nun? Best example nun is yung time. Kasi yung time, wala siyang ano lang siya, number lang siya, just a magnitude. So, dito tayo sa vector quantities, it is specified completed by its magnitude and direction, a number, a unit, and a direction. So, sa vector quantity, that is specified by the magnitude and the direction. For example is the velocity. Compared sa scalar, ang counterpart ni velocity sa scalar quantity ay yung speed. Sa speed, we are only pertaining to the value of the speed of a certain object. Sa velocity, we are pertaining to the speed with respect to its direction. Another example is distance. Sa scalar quantity, we call it distance since we are dealing only with the travel or the complete measurement of the distance taken by the or the space traveled by the object from one place to another. So, pag vector quantity, we call it displacement. That is the distance of the end point or the final point where the object stops from the origin. So, ang sunod is the polygon method of vector addition. So, dito sa vector addition, we are adding vectors. So, I've told you earlier that we're dealing with magnitude and direction here. So, the resultant vector is found by drawing each vector to scale, placing the tail of one vector to the tip of another until all vectors are shown. The resultant is that straight line drawn from the starting point to the tip of the last vector. So, for the graphical method for vector addition, you have to use ruler, protractor, then graphing paper, and then a scale. So, here in the vector addition, we're dealing with so since polygon method tayo, that is head to tail. Sa polygon method, we will be using head to tail. Wait, I'll just write that. This is for polygon method. And gusto ko lang din ibanggitin na meron din tayo na parallelogram method. Parallelogram method. And that is, so sa parallelogram method, yan na yung tail to tail. So ano ba yung sinasabi na head to tail, tail to tail? So sa head to tail, we are pertaining to an arrow. So we have here an arrow. So sa isang vector, it is written by the it can be expressed by a certain variable, let's say a, then that one. So that means that one is a vector. So that is vector a, and for example, it has a magnitude of 300 meter and a direction of 60 degrees. So if kung ipa-plot nyo yan sa isang graphing paper, for example, kunwari accurate to itong nasa PowerPoint. So we have here 300 degrees, that is 60. 300 meter, that is 60 degrees, and let's say our scale is 1 cm is equal to 1 cm is equal to 100 meter. So therefore we'll be using 3 cm here. So ito yun. That is our vector A. So label natin na siya si vector A. And that is 60 degrees. Then sa polygon method, sabi ay placing the tail one vector to the tip of another until all vectors are drawn. So kung meron po tayong isa pang vector na this is our head and this is the tail. Just so you know. Tail. So kung meron pa tayong isang given na 250 meter, then that is 0 degrees. So ang gagawin natin, ito yung head, ko-connect natin dito sa tail. So yan na yung ating vector B, and that is 0 degrees. So ganyan nagwo-work yung polygon method. And yung sabi, the resultant is the straight line drawn from the starting point to the tip of the last vector. So to draw the resultant vector, magmumula ka dito sa starting point until the tip of the vector. So therefore, ang resultant vector is from here up to here. Therefore, ito yung ating resultant vector. Kukuhanin mo ngayon yung sukat niyan by using your ruler, then converting it back to meter by using your scale. And after that, you will use your protractor to get the angle of this vector from the origin or from the x-axis. I hope na-get nyo yung nangyayari sa polygon method. So for parallelogram method naman, kung gusto nyo rin itry, so given ulit itong dalawang ito. So kung example na ito yung ating XY plane, tapos meron tayong parallelogram method na tail to tail. So 300 degrees, 300 meter. So ito yan. Again, same scale tayo. that is 60 degrees, that is our A naught. Tapos, meron tayong vector B na 0 degrees and 250 meters. So, same scale tayo. Ito yung ating vector B. So, how does the parallelogram method works? Ang gagawin natin, bubuo tayo ng isang parallelogram para mahanap natin yung resultant. So, how that works? So, ito yung ating vector B. So, i-connect mo siya dito. Then yung sunod, meron tayo dito. So, yan na yung ating reflection and nakabuo nga tayo ng isang parallelogram. So, sa parallelogram method, paano natin isusukatin yung resultant? So, para naman sa resultant, ang gagawin nyo lang is to measure from that point, from the origin again, until the intersection of the imaginary lines that is, So, yung resultant ay makukuha nyo from the origin of, from the starting point or from the tail of both vector until the intersection of the reflected vectors. So, ito yon hanggang dito. So, yan yung ating resultant. So, makukuha mo lang yan ulit by means of measuring it using your measuring tools that you have. So, anong napansin nyo? Same lang ang structure or same lang din ang itsura ng graph ni R dito sa ating graph 2 at sa graph 1. So, that only means that parehas din lang ang ginagawa ng polygon method at parallelogram method. But in this case, parallelogram method only works when there are only two vectors existing in the problem. Sa polygon method, ito yung mas effective kasi magagamit mo to when you are given with so many vectors. The parallelogram method of vector addition, the resultant of two vectors is the diagonal of a parallelogram formed by two vectors as adjacent sides. The direction is away from the common origin of the two vectors. So, yun na rin yung nabanggit ko kanina. So, yan. Representation of vectors. This is how we represent a vector. Given a vector A, so yan nga A, tapos may arrow sa taas, is equal to itong gantong symbol, then A sub 1 and A sub 2, then for 2-dimensional to. This means this is the X component and this is yung Y component. So, when you represent vector AB, ang mangyayari doon ay ito yun. Magiging vector B1 minus vector A1, vector B2 minus vector A2. So, yung sunod naman natin is the magnitude of a vector. So, sa magnitude of a vector for 3D, we are using this formula. This is the absolute magnitude of the vector is equal to the square root of its components such as the x, y, and z components. So, ang sunod na is, what are these terms? The unit vector, position vector, and zero vector. So, unit vector, it is a dimensionless vector whose magnitude is exactly 1 and whose direction is fixed. Fixed by definition. Yan. Sa position vector naman, a representation of a vector that starts at point this is a representation of this kind of vector that starts from the point A, that is from the origin, and ends at the point A1, A2, and A3. So that is the position vector. Sa zero vector naman, a vector with which its component are all zero. So we also have standard basis vector. So dito, we are dealing with unit vectors that comes in pairs in three-dimensional plane. So sa unit vector, meron tayong 2D and tsaka 3D. So sa pag 3D, we are using I, J, and K to denote the three-dimensional plane, where I is for the x axis and J is for the y axis, then K is for the z axis. Then for the two-dimensional plane, the standard basis vector was given by I and J only. So yung I against x-axis and J for the y-axis. So sa two-dimensional, technically we're dealing with xy, yz, or xz. For the three-dimensional, we are dealing with x, y, and z. So next is vector addition. The x and y components of a vector are and theta, where r is your resultant and theta is the direction. So, sa resultant, meron tayong x and y component. This is the rx and ry. So, sa rx, that is the same as resultant times cosine theta, where theta is the direction or the degree of the resultant. And ito yung direction, and this one is the magnitude. So you can obtain the x component. This is the x component of the resultant r, and then this is the y component of the resultant r. And you can obtain this by summing up the x component of each vectors given. So kung kumari meron kang tatlong vectors, namely a, b, and c, and if you take the x component for each part by means of using its direction and magnitude using the cosine, so a cosine theta is equal to a sub x, b sub x is equal to b cosine theta, and so on. Then to get the resultant, you will be using r is equal to the square root of yung squared ng x component ni resultant, then yung square ni y component. And for the direction naman ng resultant, that is equal to the inverse tangent of the y component of the resultant over the x component of the resultant.
So next natin is yung vector arithmetic. So sa vector arithmetic, it consists of mathematical operations between vectors. So sa vector arithmetic, class, we add or subtract vectors. And to do that, we are just simply adding or subtracting their components. So sa ating vector A, we have components A1, A2, A3, and for vector B, we have B1, B2, B3, and 2. And when you are asked to solve or to determine the sum or the difference of two vectors, you are just simply taking the sum and difference of each components. So for the scalar multiplication naman, it is a factor. It is when a factor is multiplied to a set of vectors. So when you are given by a vector A multiplied by a factor C, it is the same as multiplying each of its component by the factor C. So ang natin is yung product of vectors. So product of vectors, we have the dot product. So dot product, it is the scalar product of two vectors denoted by the vector A dot vector B. So the dot product of vector A and vector B is equal to the product of its magnitude A and B times cosine theta. So AB cosine theta is also equivalent to the product of the x component of A and B plus the y component of A and B plus the product of the y components of A and B and plus the z components of A and B. Then, for the next is we have the cross product. So, dito naman sa cross product, dito tayo gagamit ng matrices. And the cross product of two vectors such as A and B is equivalent to the product of the A and B, which is their magnitude, times sine theta. And that is also equivalent to the what do you call that, the difference of the cross products of each on the matrix. So ang ating formula for that is yung AY times BZ, ito, then AZ BY, that is our first pair. Then yung sunod natin is AZ, yung sunod na yung AZ BX times minus AX BZ. Then yung sunod naman natin is yung AX BY, then yung minus the AY BZ. So that is how the cross product takes place. So this is the formula of how you evaluate, or this is yung the presentation or of the formula of how you evaluate this kind of matrix for the cross product. So, sunod natin is yung direction cosines. So, the direction cosines, that is where the angles that form, that is the angles that form by the direction angles. So, it is given by the standard basis vectors, yung I, J, and K. So, the formula includes yung cosine alpha is equal to A sub x over the vector A. Then, yung cosine beta is equal to AY. So, ito yung ating magiging direction cosines. This is for the I hat, then J hat, then for the Z hat. K hat. So, yan yung magiging angle theta for each direction for each component. Then sunod naman, we have the vector projections. So, sa vector projections, meron tayong given na vector A and vector B, and the projection of B onto A is denoted by this. So, projection of B onto A. So, these are the formula for that. So, in sketching to get the projection, you must draw a straight line from the end of B until you hit and form a right angle that is parallel to A. So, yun. Yan. So, for problem number 6, the x component of vector A is negative 25.0 meter. So, given natin na x component ni vector A is equal to 25 meter. Then, sunod naman is ang y component ni A, which is yung 40 meter. So, ang tinatanong ay magnitude ng vector A. So, to solve for that, we will be using the formula is equal to the square root of ax squared plus ay squared. Substitute natin si values. Vector A is equal to the square root of 25 squared plus 40 squared. Take note na hindi ko na nilagay si negative sa loob since if you square the negative sign, that will be positive as well. So that would be useless na rin. So solving for vector A, that is equal to the square root of 25 squared plus 40 squared. That is equal to 47.2 meter. So that is, since negative yung isa, then positive yung pataas, therefore that is on the second quadrant. So papaganon. So para mahanap natin kung anong angle yan, gagamitin natin to solve for letter B, since yun na rin yung tinatanong sa letter B is the angle. We will use the formula theta is equal to arctan of AY over AX. So ang gagawin natin, we will just substitute it with tan negative 1 times yung AY na 40 over yung AX na 25. So we put the negative sign here. We arctan 40 over negative 25. Therefore, our angle would be negative 57.995, or technically negative 58 degrees. So that is just 58 degrees, and since ang direction niya is upward to the left, so yun. So therefore, our answer for this one is equal to 47.2 meter, 58 degrees. So next natin is, so for problem number 7, we are to find the resultant vector of this figure. So how do we find for that? We will first solve for the x and y component of the resultant. So to solve for the x and y component of the resultant, we are talking about r of x, which is equivalent to a sub x plus b sub x plus c sub x plus d sub x. Since apat to. Then yung sunod is we solve for the each component. So that is equal to, so ang ax natin is equivalent to a cosine theta, where theta is the degree of that vector. So that is a, which is 8 cosine theta, which is 270. Then yung sunod, plus yung b natin na 15 times yung angle niya is naka-reference sa y-axis, therefore we'll flip the usage of sine and cosine. For the x component, we'll use the sine 30, then plus, sunod natin is yung c, which is 12 times cosine 25. But then this is on the left axis, on the left part, so that would be negative. That would be negative So, yung sunod naman is yung D, which is 10. So, that would be minus as well since nasa kaliwa siya ng x-axis. So, that would be 10. So, again, naka-reference siya sa y-axis. So, that would be sine 53. Sunod natin is to compute na for r of x. So, solve for r of x. You will get 11.36 meter. Then, ang next is you will solve for the ry, which is the y component. So, for the y component, we are talking about ay plus by plus cy plus dy. So, ang ngayon, we substitute again the values. So, a is 8, y since sine 270 tayo, plus yung b natin na 15 sine. So, since naka-reference siya sa y, so I said earlier, flip tayo ng usage ni cosine and sine. So, that would be cosine 30. Then, ito, letter C. That would be plus, so minus 12 cosine 25. I mean sine 25. Then, sunod as is yung plus 10 times cosine 53. So, now nabuo natin si equation. We solve for ry. You calculate it. So, solving for ry, you must obtain, wait, konti natin. 8 sine 270 plus 15 cosine 30 minus 12 sine 25 plus 10 cosine 53. So, what we have obtained is 5.94 meter. So now that we are able to obtain the rx and ry, we will now solve for the resultant magnitude. So that is equal to the square root of rx squared plus ry squared. So substituting the value, that is 11.36. So let this be negative. So that would be 11.36 squared plus 5.94 squared equals 12. So you must obtain an answer of 12.82 meter. And for the theta, be arctan of ry over rx So substituting the value, that is a 5, tan -1 of 5.94 meter over 11.36 meter. So that is 5.94, tan 5.94 over 11.36. So that is 27.60 degrees. So that is the answer for the problem. Therefore, the resultant of the figure is located here, which is 27.60 degrees from the x-axis. So that is for problem number 7. For problem number 8, here are two vectors. Vector A, which is equal to 4.0 meter I hat minus 3 meter j hat, and the vector B, which is equal to 6 meter I hat plus 8 meter j hat. So, ang tanong, the magnitude, what are the magnitude and the angle relative to I of the vector A? Then, sunod is, what are the magnitude and the angle of the vector B? So, when we solve for the vector or the magnitude, we remember the formula. We should remember the formula. For the vector A, the magnitude, the formula for that magnitude is the vector A, the magnitude of the vector A is equal to the square root of xi squared plus yj squared. J hat. Sorry, j hat. So, kung 3D naman, recall yung formula na, kung kunwari, tatlo yan, that would be the vector or the magnitude is equal to the square root of x I. Yung x natin is yung magnitude, then yung I is yung unit vector, I hat, plus yj hat squared plus yung z k squared, k hat squared. So, yan yung pag 3D. Ganyan ang pagkuha ng magnitude. So, ngayon, we are given with two unit vectors lang. So, to solve for the magnitude for letter A, what's natin kulay? For letter A, the magnitude is equivalent to vector A is equal to the square root of 4 squared plus negative 3 squared. So, pansin nyo, ginawa ko siyang negative since ito ay minus sign. So, kung plus yan, magiging positive lang yan. Just to indicate or just to use the sign here. So, that is equal to 5. Therefore, the magnitude of vector A is 5. Next is to solve for the angle relative to I. So, we have two formulas. Yun, ang formula natin ay, for letter B, is vector A times yung I equal to A times I hat cosine theta, and this formula is similar to the cosine law. Then, yung next naman, since ang sabi dito ay relative to I, therefore, ito yung formula na gagamitin natin. So, substitute, so, i-manipulate natin tong formula in order to solve for the angle. So, magiging, divide natin both sides by this one. So, that would be cosine theta equals vector A dot I over vector A times I. Then, solve for the theta. That would be theta is equal to our cosine of vector A over the magnitude with respect to, with relative to I. Ngayon, sasubstitute natin si values. Dito tayo sa baba. So, for letter B, theta is equal to arc cosine of yung ating vector or yung ating unit vector relative to I, which is 4 meter I hat. So, that is 4I hat over yung ating magnitude, and that is 5. So, that is 5I hat. Ngayon, evaluate lang natin to. Input nyo sa calculator. So, we will obtain theta is equal to 36.9 degrees. That is the value for the angle of vector A relative to I. So, i-box na natin yung mga sagot. 1, 2. Yan. Next is solve for letter C, which is the magnitude naman of B. The magnitude of B. So, same process. We will use again this formula. It would be vector B is equal to the square root of 6 squared plus 8 squared. That is equal to 10. So, the magnitude for 10 is this one. Then, ang next natin is the angle of B. So, para mahanap natin si angle of B, assume na lang natin na ito ay relative to I na rin para parehas lang din ang process and formula. So, for letter D, we will use the same formula. Palitan natin si A as B. So, letter B is equal the vector B or, mali ulit. Vector B times is equal to ulit. Sorry, sa likod. That is vector B dalawa din pala ito dapat. Then yung sunod is yung I, then cosine theta. So, manipulate natin ulit to solve for the theta. That is, theta is equal to our cosine of vector B times I over B times I. Substitute natin si values. Our cosine of 6i, which is yung value for the unit vector in the x or in the I part. So that will be 6i over 10i. And that is equivalent to 53.1 degrees. So that is the angle of B, of vector B. And that is all for problem number 8. Now, problem 9. Vector A has a magnitude of 6 units, vector B has a magnitude of 7 units, and the dot product of A and B has a value of 14. So what is the angle between the direction of vector A and B? So let's recall the formula for the dot product as so this is the formula that I told you a while ago. So to solve for the angle, we can simply substitute the value, which is this one. This is A, and then this is B, vector B. Then this is the product. So we can just simply solve for the theta by means of manipulating this formula and substituting the values to solve for the angle. So to manipulate it, we will arrive at the cosine theta equals A, which is the product over the product of two vectors. Then ang next natin is to solve for the theta. So therefore, to solve for the theta, we will be using arc cosine. So for the inverse cosine, so that the angle is equal to the inverse cosine of A times B all over that vector times yung vector B. So next natin isa-substitute natin yung values. So ating value is that arc cosine of 14 over yung A natin is 6 times 7. So therefore, theta is equal to, just input in it on your calculator. That is 4 over 6 times 7. And that must be equal to 84. Mali tayong input. So that is 70.53 degrees. So that is the angle between the directions of vector A and vector B. And that is our final answer for this problem. So now, we are on problem 10. So, in the product of the vector f, vector f is equal to q times the vector v times the cross product of q times the vector b and the vector v and the vector b. Take q is equal to 2, then vector v is equal to 2i plus 4, 2i hat plus 4j hat plus 6k hat, and f is equal to 4i 4i hat minus 20j hat plus 12k hat. What then is b or vector b in unit vector notation if bx is equal to by? So ngayon, meron tayong nag-exist na scalar product and yung cross product. So, the vector f is equal to q times the vector v and the cross product to the vector b. So we all know that the cross product of q times the vector 2 I mean 2 times vector v is just the same as 2 times 2, 4, and 6. Then in the cross product to the vector b, which is bx, by, then bz. So ang gagawin natin, since we are in cross product, we will create matrix here. So meron tayong I hat, j hat, then k hat. So for the I hat, we have 4 times 8 times, and then 12, I mean not times. So for susunod naman we have bx, by, and bz. So what's next is 2. So for now, after mo ma-evaluate, I mean masulat mo dyan, then magiging, we will write to the left hand side that is equal to f. So that would be the quantity of 4, then negative 20, then itong 12. Then that is equal to the right hand side, which is this one. So we evaluate it first. So una is yung ito minus ito. So that would be 8b sub 2 minus yung 12b sub y. So that is 12b sub, I mean it is a sorry. That's b sub y. Then yung sunod is ito. I mean like another color. Ito and ito. So that would be b sub c. I mean 4b sub c minus 12b sub x. Then ang sunod is yung, what do you call this? Next ay itong sunod ay itong 4by, ito, tsaka ito, tapos ito, at tsaka ito. So that would be 4by minus 8bx. Yan. So ngayon, nakuha na natin sila. Ang next natin is to rewrite it using the ijk notation. I mean the unit vector notation. So that is 4 I hat minus 20 j hat, then plus 12k hat equals 8 b z I hat minus tapos magiging 12 by I, then minus yung 4 bc minus 12 bx j minus yung magiging 4 by minus 8bx. Okay. So, ngayon ay magsasolve tayo using systems of equation in order to solve for the value of b. But before that, we take into consideration this value. So, therefore, since bx is equal to by, we can simply write this as 4I hat minus 20j hat plus 12k equals x is equal to by. So let's change all all y into x. So that would be 8b c minus 12bx 4b c minus 12bx plus 4bx minus 8bx. Okay. So, ngayon ito, we can combine it na lang. So, that is 4 minus 8, negative 4. That would be negative 4bx. Okay. So, ngayon, we can perform systems of equations. So, gagawin natin, for the I part, we have 4 equals 8bj minus 12bx. Then for the j part, we have negative 20 equals negative 4bj plus 12bx. Then for the k part, we have negative 12 equals negative 4bx. So from here, we can solve for bx na. So that is bx is equal to negative 3. So substituting it to the equation here, so we can have bj is so this is equal to by as well. So sa bj natin yun ay 4 alpha equals, I'm solving for bj, so that would be x minus 12, bx is negative 3, so times negative 3. Sure. So our value of bj is negative 4. So from here, we know that the value for the vector notation of since we already know the value of bx, by, and bj, therefore our final answer is that the vector b is equal to negative 3, negative 3, then negative 4. That is our answer for problem number 10.